The last day of my conscription service began like any other day. My bunkmates and I were lounging around, reminiscing about the past years of our service. The camaraderie we built was palpable, and we spent the night packing up our gear, each item a reminder of the challenges and triumphs we had shared. The bunk was a mess of half-packed bags, stray boots, and crumpled uniforms. Laughter filled the air as we recounted our favorite memories. Lee, our resident joker, was in the middle of telling yet another hilarious story when someone mentioned the locked bunk on the second level. It was a place of mystery and intrigue, and we had always wondered what was inside. "Hey, why don't we raid the locked bunk?" Chris suggested, a mischievous glint in his eye. The idea was met with unanimous enthusiasm. It was our last day, after all. What better way to cap off our service than by solving the mystery that had plagued us for so long? As the night progressed, we gathered our courage and made our way to the second level. The corridor was dimly lit, and the silence was almost deafening. We reached the door, its padlock rusty from years of neglect. With a few swift blows from a hammer we had borrowed from the maintenance room, the lock broke open. Pushing the door open, we were hit by a musty smell. The room was dark, but the moonlight filtering through the small window cast eerie shadows. Our flashlights revealed old bunk beds, cobwebs, and an unsettling stillness. Then, as we stepped further inside, we saw it. A figure hung from the ceiling, swaying gently as if moved by an invisible breeze. The sight chilled us to the bone. It was a soldier, his face pale and lifeless. Panic set in, but before we could react, the bunk beds started to shift. They moved slowly at first, then more violently, as if being pushed by an unseen force. We stared at the sight before us, unsure of what we should do next. Our hearts pounded in our ears as fear gripped us, rooting us to the ground. The drop of sweat from my chin jolted us back to our senses as someone shouted out, "Let's get out of here." The moment we were about to turn our backs and run off, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. We were trapped. The room seemed to come alive with an evil presence. The beds creaked and groaned, moving towards us. It felt like a scene from a horror movie, but it was all too real. Desperation gave us strength. We forced the door open with a few swift kicks that was taught during our close-quarter combat training and ran, not daring to look back. The corridor felt endless, but we finally reached the safety of our own bunk. We were breathless, our hearts pounding in our chests. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other in disbelief. "What the hell was that?" Lee whispered, his voice trembling. No one had an answer. We made a silent pact that night to never speak of what we had seen. The fear and confusion were too great, and we knew no one would believe us. We finished packing in silence, the earlier excitement replaced by a lingering dread. The next morning we parted ways, each of us eager to leave the memory of that night behind. But the experience stayed with us, a dark secret we carried alone. Even now, years later, the image of that hanged soldier and the moving beds haunts my dreams. We left the army that day, but a part of us stayed in that room, trapped with the ghosts of the past. As I think about this again years after leaving, I can still feel the cold sweat of that night, the sheer terror. I don't know what we encountered in that locked bunk, but one thing is certain: some doors are better left unopened. It was another long night of guard duty at the military base, a sprawling complex that doubled as a training school for sergeants and warrant officers. This base was more than just a place of training. It was steeped in history and extended into the dense jungle, far from the bustle of modern civilization. As a specialist myself, I knew the routine inside and out. Tonight, I was partnered with Corporal Lawrence, a reliable guy who had an knack for spotting trouble before it became a real issue. We set off on our patrol, our flashlights cutting through the inky darkness. The usual sounds of the night accompanied us: crickets, the distant call of nocturnal birds, and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. About halfway through our rounds, we neared the old abandoned 3-story barracks. This place had always given me the creeps. It was a relic from decades past, left to decay in the elements. We were about to pass it by when we heard it, an always faint but distinct, coming from within. "What was that?" Lawrence asked, stopping in his tracks. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Probably just the wind. Let's keep moving." Just as we were about to brush it off, the barracks lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow from the windows. Our radios crackled to life as we reported the anomaly to the Sentry HQ, requesting permission to investigate. Permission granted. "Proceed with caution," came the response, the operator's voice calm yet firm. We approached the building, guns at the ready. The lights had gone out again, plunging the barracks back into darkness. With every step, the wooden floorboards creaked under our weight, echoing through the empty halls. "Hello, is anyone here?" Lawrence called out, his voice steady but wary. We heard shuffling sounds coming from one of the bunks to our right. Moving in tandem, we approached the source of the noise. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed open the door, flashlight beam sweeping the room. That's when we saw it. A dark human figure standing at the far end of the room. Before we could react, it started running towards us, its footsteps loud and hurried. "Run!" I shouted, fear overtaking training as we bolted out of the room. We sprinted down the corridor, not daring to look back. My mind was racing, every horror story I'd ever heard about this place flashing through my head. Outside, we caught our breath and reported the encounter to HQ, requesting immediate backup. We stayed on edge, weapons ready as we waited. When the reinforcements arrived, a thorough search of the barracks began. After a tense hour, the mystery was finally unraveled. The figure we had seen turned out to be a foreign construction worker. He had been hiding in the abandoned building to avoid detection, as his work permit had expired and he feared being sent back. Relief washed over us, mingled with a sense of embarrassment. The adrenaline had masked our rational thinking, and we had let fear get the better of us. Guess he was more scared of us than we were of him, Lauren said, chuckling nervously. The incident was logged, and we were reminded of the importance of maintaining composure and following protocol. As we resumed our patrol, the night seemed a little less dark, and the old barracks, while still eerie, had lost some of their ominous power. Looking back, that night taught me a valuable lesson. In the military, the unexpected can happen at any moment, but it's our training and composure that see us through. And sometimes, the ghosts we fear turn out to be just as human as we are. It was the third day of our 7-day jungle survival training, and my team of 4 was starting to feel the strain. The dense foliage seemed to close in around us with every step, the air thick with humidity and the sounds of the jungle a constant reminder of how far we were from civilization. My team included Corporal John, Corporal Wong, Sergeant Ross, and myself. We had been briefed on the challenges ahead, but nothing could have prepared us for the reality of the jungle. Before we embarked on this journey, there had been rumors circulating among the soldiers. Stories about locals who lived deep within the jungle and would occasionally approach soldiers, offering goods and necessities. Sports drinks, energy bars, handcrafted tools. These items were said to give soldiers an edge during the grueling course. We had laughed about it, dismissing it as mere campfire tales. As we trudged along the narrow, overgrown path, sweat trickled down my face, mixing with the dirt and grime that had accumulated over the past days. The only thing keeping our spirits up was the camaraderie we had built and the hope that the next checkpoint was not too far away. There in a small clearing was a primitive tent and a campfire. Seated beside the fire was an older man, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering flames. He looked up as we approached, a friendly smile spreading across his face. He looked up at us and smiled. "Hello there," he greeted in a deep, reassuring voice. "I'm Michael, a retired master sergeant, just camping here to relive my experiences in this jungle one last time." We exchanged glances, stunned by the uncanny resemblance to the rumors we'd been mocking. Michael offered us sports drinks, energy bars, and even handcrafted tools. It felt like a scene from one of our campfire tales. "I know this jungle like the back of my hand," he said, spreading a worn map on the ground. "Let me help you get to your checkpoints." We were skeptical but also intrigued and, frankly, desperate for any help we could get. He guided us through the thick underbrush, pointing out shortcuts and safer paths. His knowledge of the terrain was impressive. He knew which plants were safe to eat, where to find fresh water, and how to avoid the more treacherous areas. That night we camped together around his fire. Michael shared stories from his days in the military, tales of bravery, camaraderie, and the harsh lessons learned in the jungle. We listened intently, captivated by his wisdom and the sense of security he brought us. The next morning we packed up our gear and set off again, with Michael leading the way. His presence was calming, and his guidance made the journey seem less daunting. Around midday we reached a fork in the path. "This is where we part ways," he said. "I want to explore another area I haven't seen in years. Follow this path and you'll reach your next checkpoint by nightfall." We thanked him profusely, reluctant to see him go but grateful for his help. As we watched him disappear into the jungle, a strange sense of loss settled over us. By the next morning, we found ourselves closer to the exit than we had expected. We had reached the final checkpoint, a full 2 days ahead of schedule. It didn't make sense, we clearly remembered enduring the full 7 days, yet here we were. When we reported our early arrival, our commander was pleasantly surprised. "Well done, boys. Did you meet a lost soldier out there?" he asked, chuckling. "Sounds like my old course mate from 20 years ago gave you some help. Always said he'd never leave the jungle." We didn't laugh. Instead, we exchanged uneasy glances, the memory of Michael fresh in our minds. The commander noticed our silence and continued, "He never made it out, you know. Met with an accident during one of the survival trips. We searched for days but never found him." Before continued to ramble about us taking a shortcut to reach our destination and how dangerous it is. But the talk about following the planned course and safety during such exercises were the least of our worries. We exchanged uneasy glances, the memory of Michael still fresh in our minds. Could it have been him? Had we really met the man our commander was talking about? As we packed up our gear and prepared to leave the base, I could not shake the feeling of unease. The jungle had always been a place of mystery, but now it felt even more enigmatic. I looked at my teammates, each of us silently wondering the same thing: had we truly encountered a ghost from the past? The journey home was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. We never spoke about Michael again, but the experience stayed with us. Even now, years later, I sometimes find myself thinking about that old soldier, his friendly smile, and the eerie coincidence of our encounter. The jungle holds many secrets, and some of them, it seems, are best left unexplored. If you've enjoyed the content so far, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more horror stories to keep you awake at night. For more creepy tales, click the link on the screen now.